What I'm in. So, like Timmy said, we're continuing your series on Moved by God, essentially looking at ways of transforming ourselves. And today we're specifically looking at from slothfulness to diligence. And I just wanted to start by asking a question. Does anyone know what slothfulness means? Sloth. Yeah, lazy. That's essentially the meaning. It's to be lazy. And I think it's a timely message for us because coming out of lockdown, I know myself in lockdown, I slept more, I ate more, I did less, I was less active. Thank you. I became very accustomed to a certain lifestyle. You know, there's no obligations, there's no events. You know, there's no reason to take care of yourself. No one's getting haircuts. No one's trying to look good for anyone else because you're not seeing anyone. So I became very lazy. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that was the nature of the lockdown. Okay, so I think it's a timely message, you know, going from lockdown to freedom, for me to also start thinking about, you know, coming out of that laziness and being diligent. And I'm a big hypocrite. I'll say that from now. I'm probably the biggest sloth here. Okay, you can convince me otherwise after, but I know myself and I know how lazy I am. It takes a lot for me to just get up and actually do something that I'm required to do. Like, for instance, this talk, which took me, I've known about it for about, 3 months or so, and I probably started it a couple of days ago. So it is something, you know, I don't want to say it's in my nature, but I am a very lazy person. Okay, so I'm a hypocrite when I tell you these things, but we're like speaking about this together, and maybe we can have a bit of a discussion at the end. The other thing I want to say is, thankfully, there is a really beautiful talk on the exact same thing, From Sloth to Diligence by Father Elijah on Upper Room Media. So the most beneficial thing I can tell you is, if you get nothing out of this talk, by all means, please listen to Father Elijah's talk on Upper Room Media. He looks at it from a very positive point of view. He chose to focus on diligence. I'm going to take the more negative approach and look at being slothful. Okay, we're going to focus on the slothfulness side of things and how we can approach, you know, my own slothfulness, how I can identify that I'm a lazy person, and how I can overcome it. So, what does the Bible say about being slothful, being lazy? In Proverbs 19, and a lot of comments on laziness and slothfulness you'll find in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 19 says, "Laziness casts one into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger." In the next chapter, it says, "The lazy man will not plow because of winter. He will beg during harvest and have nothing." And have nothing. They're extremely powerful words on laziness, on being slothful. Okay? Casts one into deep sleep. They will suffer hunger. They will, you know, not plow because of winter. They will have nothing. They will have nothing. So what does the Bible say about being diligent? In Romans chapter 12, St. Paul introduces this idea of how we ought to behave as Christians. Okay? And he lists a number of things. Okay? How to behave as Christians. You know, be peaceable towards one another. Be united. You know, do not be conformed to this world, but by the renewing of your mind, be transformed. Okay? He lists a number of things. And then he says, specifically, when talking about behaving like a Christian, what we ought to do, he says, "Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor, giving preference to one another, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord." Not lagging in diligence. Being quick to be diligent, being quick to serve. Okay? It is an expectation for us as Christians that we are diligent in serving God. Okay? And I like that he uses lagging before speaking of diligence. It's going to sound like a really weird analogy, but how do you know when a woman is about to give birth? Yeah, you said it. Say it out loud. Contractions. Okay? What do you need from the contractions? What do you need to know about the contractions to know that, you know, there's a difference between she's about to give birth right now, or like very soon, or you still got weeks to go? Frequency. And one more thing. Yeah. No, that's frequency. Same. No. Duration is another one. Frequency, duration, and one more. Like, sort of, you're on the right track. Frequency, contraction. Yeah, I'll take pain. Intensity. Okay, frequency, duration, and intensity. Okay? If I want to be diligent, I need those three things as well. Okay? Diligence, actually those three words are synonyms for diligence. Not exactly, but like, some kind of derivative of those words. Okay? If I'm going to be diligent, it means I need to be steady. Okay? I need to do things frequently. I need to do things with good intensity, and I need to do things for a long time. Okay? For example, I want to get big. I'm going to the gym. Is it enough for me to go to the gym once a month? It's not frequent enough. Is it enough for me to go to the gym and spend 10 minutes a day? It's not long enough. Is it enough for me to go to the gym every single day and all I do is, walk around, talk to people, carry the 1 kilo weights while I do it, smile, say hello to everyone, text? It's not intense enough. I need all three things. I need to be frequent, I need to be, I need to spend time doing it, and I need to be intense about it. And that's all we're going to say on diligence. Okay? If I really want to show diligence towards the Lord and towards serving Him, I need those three things. I need to do it frequently, I need to do it with intensity, and I need to do it for a very long time. St. Paul again says, "For God is not unjust to forget your work and labor of love, which you have shown toward His name, in that you have ministered to the saints and do minister. And we desire that each one of you show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope until the end, that you do not become sluggish, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises." It's a calling for us as Christians to be diligent. And like I said, it's more than just a calling, it's an expectation. The other thing I do want to mention, now that we're talking about slothfulness, when Christ tells parables in the Bible, he says them in a pattern. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed it. Something I noticed very recently. He says them in a pattern. So when he talks about the parable of the dragnet, in the same chapter, he talks about the parable of the pearl of great. What's the pattern? Both of those parables talk about the kingdom of heaven and obtaining the kingdom of heaven. In Luke chapter 15, does anyone know what famous parables are in Luke chapter 15? The prodigal son, lost coin, lost sheep. In the same setting, in the same circumstance, Christ tells three parables that essentially say the same message. No matter how lost you are, I'm going to find you. Again, there's a pattern. And so in Matthew 25, we find two parables. The first is, again, does anyone know? Actually, there are three in total, but I'm only looking at two. And they're all related. One of them we read every night in the midnight prayer. Yeah. The 5 wise and the 5 foolish virgins. Okay? In them, story, there are 5 wise virgins who, thought ahead, planned well, and were diligent to bring oil in their lamps. And the others were lazy. And even when the bridegroom had arrived, they wanted to take the lazy option. Give us some of your oil for our lamps are going out. No, go buy for yourselves. And we know from the church father commentaries that the oil represents works. They spent their life in laziness, in slothfulness, and they weren't able to fill their lamps with oil. Following this is the parable of the talents. Immediately following this first parable, there's the parable of the talents. And we all know that story as well. One is given however many, 5, 3, whatever, 5. And he was diligent. He used those talents, he invested them, and he brought back 5 more. The second, given 3, diligent, worked, invested, came back with 3 more. The third one was lazy. He went, he buried the 1 talent that he had, and he came back, didn't have anything to show for it. And so the Lord says to him this, "You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents." So Christ is making something very clear. Laziness is not when I am unable to work. It's when I'm unwilling to work. It is when I've been given all the necessary tools, all the necessary talents, all the necessary requirements to complete a task, and yet I take no initiative. Okay? It is detrimental to our spiritual lives. We each have the capability to stand up and pray, to fast, to serve, to read my Bible, and yet in my laziness, I chose not to. Okay? So in the end, Christ will say, "You wicked and lazy servant." It's a terrifying thought, and for that reason, it's why I want to focus on overcoming this idea or this character of being lazy, of being slothful. Okay? And so the way this talk is going to work, and it's going to be very short, God willing, we're going to look at the 3 P's of slothfulness. So I'll give you a very easy way to remember the 3 P's of slothfulness. We're going to follow an Old Testament Bible story broken up into 3 parts, provide a solution to overcoming these 3 P's of slothfulness, and then I'll just provide a recommended reading or a short story. Okay, I think I've forgotten my book there, it's all right. All right, so the story we're going to be following is the story of the Israelites returning from captivity, the second time, okay, from the Babylonian captivity. Does anyone know where we can find that story? It's found in 3 books. No. So that's right before the captivity. That's during the captivity. 3 prophets, minor prophets, because they wrote small books. Yep. Ezra's 1. Ezra opens the story. Nehemiah, second one. The third one is a little bit more obscure. Or close, starts with a H. No. No. We said all the H's. Haggai. Okay. It's actually my favorite Old Testament book. It's only 2 chapters. I highly recommend you go home and read it. And it's the one we're going to be looking at mostly today. But first, we'll just open up, if everyone can open up to Ezra chapter 1. Okay. And we'll just quickly read some of Ezra chapter 1. I'm not going to read all of it, just a little bit. It's towards the end of the Old Testament. And can I actually ask someone to read Ezra chapter 1?
Now in the first years of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, "Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth, the Lord God of the heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is among you all of all his people? May his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. He is God, which is in Jerusalem. And whoever is left in any place where he dwells, let the men of his place help him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, besides the free will offerings for the house of God which is in Jerusalem." Then the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, with all whose spirits God had moved, arose to go up and build the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem.
So why were they going back? Why were the Israelites excited to go back to Jerusalem? What was the main reason? To build. To build what? The temple. Okay, when the Babylonians came, they destroyed the temple. And so for 70 years, all the Israelites kept nagging the Babylonian kings about was, we want to go back and we want to build the temple. Okay? They were encouraged not just by the thought of going back, but they had a reason. They had a purpose. The temple was part of their identity as the people of God, and for that purpose, they needed to go back to Israel. For that purpose, they desired to go back. And so that's our first P of slothfulness. When I have no purpose, I have no reason to do anything. Okay? Purpose is what gives me a drive to do what I want to do. Okay? It guides every action, every decision I make. If I want to lose weight, what do I do? If my purpose, I feel like I have a reason to lose weight, then what am I going to do? I'm going to go on a diet. Keto, paleo, whatever they call it. I'm going to exercise. And I'm going to do it properly. I'm going to follow a regime. If I have a reason, then I have a drive. I have a drive to do what I want to do. It's the same in my spiritual life. If I don't have a reason to pray at night, if I don't know why I'm praying at night, I'm not going to pray. If it's a superficial reason, like I just want to tick the box, I'm not going to pray. I need to have a purpose, and it needs to be deep. And it's the same thing in service. Why am I serving? Why do I serve? Is it so that I look good in front of other people? Is it so that I can impress, Abuna or the other servants? If that's my purpose, it's not going to last very long. Okay, if I have a deep personal reason, personal purpose, then it's going to drive me. Okay, everything we do in our spiritual lives needs to have a purpose attached to it because it's what drives us. And what happens when we lose purpose? What happens when you wake up one morning and you don't have a purpose? You don't have a purpose for your day. Okay, you become lazy. And when you become lazy, you're more prone to sin. I promise. I promise. Laziness is the number one cause of sin. I promise. I promise. I think about Joseph, all right? If Joseph was like lying down in bed and Potiphar's wife came in, Joseph had nothing to do, I don't know, who knows what would have happened? But Joseph was too busy. I'm tending to your master's house, your husband's house. I'm too busy for you, leave me alone. You're just doing my head in, you're wasting my time. He had purpose. Right? Let's look at someone who was lazy. In 1 Samuel chapter 11, King David wrote 3 of the Psalms. King David slayed Goliath. King David slayed 10,000 Philistines. King David was an Israelite hero. But this is what we remember him by. It happened in the spring of the year at that time when kings go out to battle. So the kings, they're supposed to go out to battle. It's their job, it's their purpose. That David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed. This is my favorite part of the story because it's so easily overlooked. Not only did David not go out to war, but it says he got out of bed in the evening. Nahum the whole day. King David, who's writing all these psalms, took a day off. That's all he did. He rested for one day. Had no purpose. Just going to rest, stay in bed, bit of mazag, Wake up, make myself some shayb al-laban, go up to the roof. Ooh, there's a pretty girl. I've got nothing better to do. Everyone's at war. And we know how the story ends. I need to have a purpose, because if I don't have a purpose, I get lazy. I become slothful. And if I become slothful, I'm prone to sin. This is where I plug in my recommended read. I don't know if anyone's ever read a book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. It's an incredible book. He's a motivational speaker, and he talks about the idea of having purpose in our lives to motivate us to do things, okay? And in it, he tells an amazing story. He tells a story about a stonemason. A stonemason is just someone who, cuts, builds, prepares using stone. And one day, one guy was walking and he walks past this stonemason who was doing work. And he asked the stonemason, "Do you like your job?" He says, it pays the bills. We work long hours. We work in the heat of the day. The work can be backbreaking. I don't even know if this project is going to be, finished in my lifetime, but it pays the bills. He says, "Okay, thanks." He thanks him for his time and he walks ahead. And then he comes across another stonemason working on the same job. And he asks the stonemason, "Do you like your job?" He says, "Do I like my job? I love my job. I'm building a cathedral. I'm building a cathedral. Sure, the work can be monotonous. We can be working in the heat of the day. The work can be backbreaking. I don't even know if this project is going to be finished in my lifetime, but I'm building a cathedral. I love my job." See the difference between the two? The difference is one of them had purpose. One of them felt like he belonged to something bigger than he was. And so that's what drove him. So the first P, if I want to be more diligent, if I want to overcome slothfulness, I need to find my purpose. And so we'll just read Haggai chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. Okay, so now the Israelites have gone back. Okay, the Israelites have gone back to Israel. They've been begging for 70 years to rebuild this temple. And then they go back, and this is 18 years later. Okay, keep that in mind because that's important. Does anyone have Haggai opened? I'll just read it from up here. Is this Haggai? Okay. I forget, I haven't read it. In the second year of King Darius, in the 6th month, on the first day of the month, the word of the Lord came by Haggai the prophet to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Jehozadak. Thus speaks the Lord of hosts, saying, "This people says, the time has not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built." Then the word of the Lord came by Haggai the prophet, saying, "Is it time for you to yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses, and this temple to lie in ruins?" This is 18 years later. 18 years later, what's happened? Okay, the Israelites have gone back and they've thought, okay, the time's not now. What we need to do first, because we can't, live in poverty while we build the temple, let's build our homes first. Let's establish a city. All right, fair enough. Okay, you've got your homes. It's not enough. We need like a big city. Okay, it needs to look good. All right, make it look nice. 10 years pass, 15 years pass. Then we need jobs. We need to maintain these homes. Okay, get a job, maintain this home. All right, now that I've got a job, I've got a bit of extra money, I want to panel my house. I want it to look better than all the other Israelite houses. All the while, the temple lay in ruins. What are they doing? This is Egyptians' favorite activity. They're procrastinating. For 18 years, they procrastinated. They had good intentions for going back, but then they procrastinated. Like we do sometimes with God. I want to do something good for you. I have good intentions, but the time's not now. St. Theophan the Recluse, in Turning the Heart to God, this is the recommended read for this section, he says, "When a good intention to change yourself comes, catch hold of it. Devote yourself to this matter for the sake of your salvation, and with this purpose, first and foremost, drive away this procrastination. With this purpose, cast away procrastination." Okay? When I find my purpose, don't procrastinate, act. Do something. When I find a reason to pray, don't wait, pray. When I find a reason to serve, don't wait, serve. Don't procrastinate. It's actually the devil's favorite trick. There's a story that tells of 3 demons who were coming to this earth. They were like rookie demons. It's obviously not a true story. They're like rookie demons, and they're coming to earth to complete their training. And so they were talking to the chief of the devils, Satan, about their plans to tempt man and to ruin them. And the first says to Satan, I will tell them that there is no God in heaven. And Satan says, that will not stop many, for they know that there is a God in heaven. And that is a dumb plan, essentially. Again, not a true story. The second says, I will tell them that there is no devil in hell. Satan answered, you are also dumb. You will deceive no one that way. Men know even now that I am real, and so is hell. And then the third says, I will tell men that they should procrastinate when it comes to Jesus, that there is no need for them to hurry. And Satan says, go. Go now. For in this way you will ruin men by the thousands. The problem with putting things off in our lives is we start living our lives in the future. Don't you do that? Like, you imagine yourself, oof, I'm going to have a summer body, okay? But I'll wait till summer to start working on it. I'm gonna be, finish. I'm gonna finish the Bible by the end of the year. But I've got a long time. 365 days is a long time. I'll start slow. Then you get to Numbers and fall asleep. You forget about the Bible for a few months. All right? We keep saying, I will do this when? I will start tomorrow or next week or next year. And we ignore the present moment that we're currently living in. Like I said, it is the devil's favorite trick. In fact, in the book, Screwtape Letters, does everyone know that book? Or at least the premise? Essentially, it's about Screwtape, who, is sending letters to his nephew Wormwood and giving him advice as to how to ruin humans. Okay? And he gives, it's his most emphasized piece of advice that he gives to Wormwood. He says to him, convince the human to live either in the past or in the future, but never in the present, because it is in the present that they can build on their spiritual lives. And he follows that with a very strong quote about the future, saying, it is far better to make them live in the future. It is unknown to them, so that making them think about it, we make them think of unrealities. It is the most completely temporal part of time, for the past is frozen and no longer flows, and the present is all lit up with eternal rays. The past, it's done, it's finished. The future doesn't actually exist. I know I'm getting a little bit deep here, but it doesn't exist. The future hasn't come yet. It doesn't exist. It's not real. There might not be a tomorrow. Looking at me funny like I just said. Sorry, man. Didn't mean to come and scare you guys. But it's true. It doesn't exist. But he wants us to live in the future, or he wants us to live in the past, so long as we're not in the present, because it's in the present that we find God. So, point number 2, when you find your purpose, don't procrastinate, act. And onto our final P, if we read Haggai chapter 2, verse 15 to 19. It says, and now carefully consider from this day forward, from before stone was laid upon stone in the temple of the Lord, since those days when one came to a heap of 20 ephahs, there were but 10. When one came to the wine vat to draw out 50 baths from the press, there were but 20. We actually don't need to read any more than that. What's happening here? What's happened is they've decided, okay, God, you've made your point. We wanted to come back. We had good purpose to come back. We came back, we procrastinated. You've made your point. But this task, rebuilding the temple, which was glorious, the most glorious building ever made, to rebuild that, it's overwhelming. It's too much. It's too much. And so God is essentially telling them, when there were 20 ephahs, before that there were just 10. Okay? Stone upon stone. Slowly but surely, you'll get there. And so our third P of slothfulness is poor planning. It's poor planning. Again, we say things like, okay, from this day forward, I'm going to read the entire midnight prayer every single night. Why? Or read the entire books of a whole book of the Bible in one go, every night. so I can get through it quicker. If we set large goals and we focus on just those large goals, we become overwhelmed and we end up doing nothing. He says to the Israelites, listen, remember the first time you built the temple? It started with just one rock, with just one brick. Just lay the foundation now and then proceed to the next step, stone upon stone, ephah upon ephah. Does anyone know who Johan Cruyff is? No. Johan Cruyff is a professional soccer player from the 80s. Yeah, he was a Dutch footballer, but he was also a big-time philosopher in soccer, right? And he says something profound about football. He says, football is simple, but the hardest thing to do is to play simple football. Football is simple, but the hardest thing to do is to play simple football. It's the same thing with Christianity. Christianity is simple, but the hardest thing to do is to practice simple Christianity. Okay? My life of prayer begins with one psalm. My life of Bible reading begins with one verse. My life of service begins with one person that I show love to, that I show kindness to. Okay? There's a book, this was my other recommended read, it's over there, it's called Atomic Habits. I was going to read something out, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to tell you the concept. Essentially, the whole book, okay, it's by James Clear, if you want to read it, highly, highly recommend it. The whole book boils down to one comment. That comment is small habits done over a long period of time result in big changes. And he offers a scientific image of what this looks like. He says if you better yourself by 1%, just 1% every single day, then you become 37 times better than you were at the beginning of the year when you come to the end of the year. Just 1%. I wake up 1 minute earlier. I read one extra verse in the Bible. I read one extra psalm. I send out one extra message of, comfort. I reach out to just one more person. 1% better every single day. By the end of the year, I become 37 times better than I was at the beginning of the year. If we consider the Israelites, today, we'll place one brick. The next day, 2. The next day, 3. The day after that, we'll put some cement. Then the next day, we'll just paint a little bit. Eventually, they will build the temple again. If I want to rebuild myself, I have to plan properly. It starts with something small, but small habits done over a long period of time result in big changes. I just thought of a story. I went on a trip to the Thailand orphanage with a group of boys. And while we were there, during the day, we would go and we would, serve in the schools, help teach English. But some days, not all of us were supposed to go, okay, because they didn't have enough space on the bus, or they didn't need as many teachers. So the ones that stayed back would paint the side of the orphanage, the wall that sort of encircled the orphanage. And this wall spanned about 100 meters, just one side. That's all we were doing. We were painting one side. And so it was our task. You've got to finish this before the end. And we were with a servant there by the name of Moses. And every day, 3 or 4 of us would go and we'd spend hours painting this wall. Hours. And then, with a couple of days left, we stopped and one of the boys looks and he's looking at what's left of the wall and he says, we're never going to finish. There's no way we're going to finish. We still have more than half of this wall left to go. Like, sorry, Moses, we're just not going to finish. And Moses, who's the one who tasked us with this job of finishing it before we left, looks at us and he's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're just looking at what you haven't done. Turn around, look at what you've done. Look how far we've come on this wall. At the beginning, none of this was done. Now we've painted nearly half of it. What if you guys don't finish it? Someone will come and someone will finish it, but look at how much you guys have done. And it's a beautiful thing about, doing small things over a long period of time, because it might not be noticeable at all. Okay? But when we look back and see how far we've come, we're filled with joy. Okay, we're excited, we're motivated to keep going. And we spent so many more hours that day working on the book, trying to finish it, because of how excited we were. Okay, so the third P is plan properly. Poor planning leads to slothfulness, so plan properly. If you want to be diligent in your spiritual lives, plan small and increase gradually. So our 3 Ps, does everyone remember them? First one is purpose. Second one is, one person remembers, I'm glad. Procrastination. And the third one, which we've just said, is planning. Purpose, procrastination, planning. But the title of your series is Moved by God, From Slothfulness to Diligence, is today's talk. So really none of this is possible without God. Any kind of transformation in my spiritual life, any kind of attaining virtue requires that I be moved by God. I can't go from being slothful to being diligent on my own. I have to be moved by God. It has to come from Him. I also need to recognize that being either diligent or slothful is not affected by my stage of life. Diligence is a virtue that I obtain. The idea that, I'm getting older, or I've got more, duties or tasks, and I've got more responsibilities, so I can't be diligent, I have an excuse to be lazy, is not true. For us Christians, if it's a virtue, I need to obtain it. If I have diligence, I will be zealous for God, no matter what stage of life I'm in, no matter if I'm working, no matter if I get married, whatever I'm doing, I'm always looking for ways to serve God. Okay? That zeal for God never leaves you. But it has to come from Him. And yeah, I agree. When you're youth, you have more time. You have more strength. In Proverbs it says, the glory of a young man is his strength. So we do have more capacity to spend time on God. But it doesn't mean that, life will affect me. Life gives me reason to be lazy. There's no reason. There's a story I heard recently. It's really interesting, and I'll finish with this because of time. It's about a youth in Egypt about 40 years ago. Okay? About the same time that, there was the rise of the Islamic Brotherhood. Okay? And at that time, a university was taken over by the Brotherhood because they requested something from the government, not sure what it is. They requested something and the government wouldn't yield. The government wouldn't give it to them. So they took over this university and they held hostage about 50 students, university students. The majority of them being Coptic. Okay? And so there was this Coptic youth, not in the university, this Coptic youth who heard that, they had taken these students hostage and they were worried that they might harm the Coptic youth, and the Coptic youth would become an example because the people that had abducted the students threatened the government that if for every day they didn't yield to their request, they would kill one student and throw them out of the university. So this Coptic youth heard the news and he thought, for sure, they're going to make an example of the Coptic youth. The Coptic youth will be the first to go. So what did he do? He did something crazy. He goes out in the middle of the night, he sneaks into the university, and he hands himself in. And these guys are like, this guy must be crazy. What do you do? Snuck in, do you want to die with them? He says, no, I'm a chef. I came here to cook for you. You're going to be in here for a long time. You're going to get hungry. Let me cook for you, but let me take some students to help me cook meals for you. So they're like, reasonable request. Take the students. So he goes and takes all the students, takes all the Coptic students, and he says, but if we're going to cook, I don't want you killing the people, I don't want you killing my cooks. I need them. You want good food? I need these youth. So for the whole time they were in the university, they didn't kill a single student because they were serving them the whole time. And eventually the government and the Islamic Brotherhood came to some sort of peace treaty and all the students were released and this youth went back home. And so Pope Shenouda heard of this youth, and he invited him over to the cathedral and ordained him a bishop. And you hear this story and you think, okay, makes sense. He was youth, he was young, he had all the time in the world. What's stopping him from going and cooking for the Islamic Brotherhood? Nothing. Why not? Of course he can be diligent. Of course he can be zealous for God. That bishop is Bastawrous in Kenya, who, if you know him, is the most active, one of the most active bishops in the world, if you've ever met him. He's 60, 70 years old, and not a day goes by where he doesn't wake up 4 or 5 a.m. to do his quiet time, where he doesn't go out into the village to serve, where he doesn't go to prisons and serve them. Still, at his old age, he still has this diligence to serve God. And it's because of this prayer, I believe, that he still has this diligence. He said this prayer when we visited Kenya, and I remember I loved it so much that I wrote it down. He says this often, "Until my final breath, Lord, never make me like an ornament left behind on the shelf to be unmoved and collect dust. Always allow me to be active for you and for your kingdom. Until my final breath, Lord, never make me like an ornament. Never make me a sloth. But Lord, make me always diligent to serve you." Okay, and it starts by finding my purpose, not procrastinating, and then planning properly. Glory be to God forevermore. Amen. Does anyone have any questions or comments? They want to start a discussion? Start a fight? Okay, thank you.
Nothing for Marc. Last opportunity, last chance.
Just as I walked into the church, he said, "I'll finish now." ليه كده يعني؟ أنا زعلتك. It's a blessing to have you with us. كلكم حلو.